So, let's talk about this Variety article that's got Godzilla fans in an uproar. Recently, Variety released their list titled The 100 Best Horror Movies of All Time, written by a group of critics, and on the surface, it's pretty standard fare. You've got the usual suspects: Psycho at number 3, The Exorcist at number 2, and the Texas Chain Saw Massacre at number 1. But when you hit number 47, things take a turn for the worst, at least according to Godzilla fans. That's where Godzilla 1954 lands, and the description they gave of the film is being criticized as demeaning and disrespectful, with some even calling it outright racist. Compare that to their glowing write-up for King Kong at number 12, and you can see why fans are upset. First and foremost, I'm going to just read you both segments from the article in full. All credit goes to Variety and the authors that worked on this piece. So trust me when I say I'm not freeloading this, go read it for yourself. For starters, here's what Variety had to say about the original 1954 Godzilla film. He's one of the most spectacular of all time movie monsters, and also one of the most grandly preposterous. It's between those two poles that Godzilla lives, occupying an uncanny valley of kitsch awe. Towering over the buildings, elevated trains, and telephone wires, he smashes through as if they were toy models. Actually, now that you mention it, with skin like shag carpeting, plates that line his back like small fur Christmas trees, and eyes so beady they're just this side of puppyish. The radioactive beast who stomped Tokyo is a walking metaphor for the nuclear devastation suffered by Japan during World War II. As such, he's as serious a figment of 20th century horror as the cinema ever gave us. But he's played by a man in a dinosaur suit, and on some level, we always know that we're watching a tacky, ingenious, apocalyptic puppet show. The original kaiju film is still the most compelling, a lavishly somber orgy of destruction. Now here's what they had to say about the original 1933 King Kong movie. A monster movie as grand and terrifying and dreamy and awesome as its title character, Kong. The giant gorilla who was uprooted from his prehistoric home and brought to New York City to be the ultimate sideshow attraction is a fearsome beast, but he's also a gargantuan innocent who becomes a figure of touching and tragic circumstance. In scenes set in the primeval dinosaur jungles of Skull Island, Willis O'Brien's revolutionary stop-motion effects have retained every bit of their wonder, and the miracle of Kong's presence is the emotion it conjures. When he grabs the original Scream Queen, Fay Wray, and climbs to the top of the Empire State Building, battling the propeller planes that want to shoot him down, no film about an otherworldly creature of elemental fear was ever so moving. Here's where it gets all tricky. The Godzilla segment describes the King of the Monsters as grandly preposterous. The Godzilla segment describes the King of the Monsters as being grandly preposterous, a walking kitsch awe, with skin like shag carpeting and plates like small fur Christmas trees. And of course the part that really digs under the skin of fans. He's played by a man in a dinosaur suit, and on some level, we always know that we're watching a tacky, ingenious, apocalyptic puppet show. Now compare that to how they treat King Kong. They call Kong a fearsome beast, but also a gargantuan innocent, and they wax poetic about the emotion it conjures and how terrifying and dreamy the film is. The language here has reverence, almost mythic sense, focusing on the beauty and wonder of the special effects, the emotional weight of the story, and the sheer power of the monster's presence. It's the kind of glowing treatment that you'd expect from a film considered one of the greats. But when you put these two side by side, it's like night and day. Godzilla, a film that, like King Kong, was groundbreaking for its time. A film that carries the heavy metaphor of nuclear devastation and Japan's post-war trauma. It gets reduced to a kitsch, tacky puppet show, while King Kong is held up as a deeply emotional masterpiece. This is what's really rubbing fans the wrong way. The language used for Godzilla downplays its cultural and historical significance in favor of just mocking its aesthetics. Saying his eyes are just this side of puppyish, or comparing his dorsal plates to Christmas trees, completely undermines the gravitas of what the movie represents. Godzilla isn't just some monster flick, it's an allegory for the horrors of the atomic bomb. The destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This isn't just a movie about a guy in a suit stomping through model buildings. It's a film that grapples with real-world devastation and the existential fear that nuclear weapons brought into the global consciousness. Look, no one's arguing that King Kong isn't a landmark in cinema. It absolutely is, but where's that same energy for Godzilla? Both films revolutionized the monster genre. Both pushed the boundaries of special effects. And yet, Godzilla gets treated like a silly B-movie while King Kong is heralded as high art. But what are some Godzilla fans saying? Let's take a trip over to the cesspool that is the social media site formerly known as Twitter to find out. Yoko Higuchi quote-tweeted the original article saying, "This section in this Variety article on Godzilla is the perfect example of how American outlets continue to talk down on tokusatsu films, and how they feel the need to use words like kitsch or tacky to describe them. They would never say this about King Kong. This is racism." User Oculus Imperia showcased the article and said the following: "I swear, Godzilla and all kaiju movies are a perfect litmus test for whether or not a critic can engage in any suspension of disbelief or appreciate production craft in the slightest without sneering in haughty contempt." Nikki of the Living Dead responded to Oculus Imperia stating, "Love that when it's King Kong, it's ahead of its time and made with love, but when it's Godzilla, which helped revolutionize miniatures, it's silly. Typical backhanded and hypocritical shit." A post by the Academy Awards about their Godzilla-thon event was quote-tweeted by user Mesozoic, who said, "Variety wrote a patronizing, condescending article reeking of paralyzing fear that we may think they enjoy Godzilla unironically. Meanwhile, the Academy is celebrating one of their Oscar-winning franchises. Guess they prefer to get with the times, at least in this case." However, some fans were a little bit more fair to the Variety article. One of my Twitter mutuals, Kaiju number 14, said the following: "In all fairness, nobody in the public knew how the special effects of King Kong were handled on its release, according to Ray Harryhausen. Meanwhile, at the time of Godzilla's release, some Japanese and Western critics pointed out that it was evident how the special effects were done. E.g., Tokai Evening Issue said, 'When Godzilla shows up from the sea, it's obviously a water tank in the studio. That was a disappointment.' And Bosley Crowther of the New York Times said, 'The filmmakers made a close study of the old film King Kong, then tried to do substantially the same thing with a miniature of a dinosaur made of gumshoes and about $20 worth of toy buildings and electric trains. Yes, the special effects for Godzilla received lots of praise too in Japan and awards, but in the West, the special effects weren't really appreciated and acknowledged for their influence by publications until like the 21st century.'" Another Twitter user, Alan Mott, stated the following regarding the matter: "Horror nerds' massive overreaction to the Godzilla blurb in the Variety list speaks only to their insecurities about the work they love. Horror films are great, not despite the fact that they are often ridiculous, they are great because of it." And finally, a Twitter user named Lex questioned whether or not this film was even written by people who knew and understood horror films at all. They wrote, "Human Centipede 2 was clearly added as rage bait. Some of the films don't even have the right images. The synopsis of Godzilla was used to bash it despite being in the top 50. Can Variety hire someone that actually likes genre material make a best horror films list? Please?" So, is the backlash justified? Absolutely. Godzilla fans have every right to feel disrespected by how the film was described. The condescending tone in the Variety write-up feels dismissive of everything that makes Godzilla so important. Not just as a monster movie, but as a piece of post-war cinema. In the end, this is about respect. Godzilla deserves to be talked about with the same level of thoughtfulness and reverence as someone like King Kong. Both films were milestones in cinema, and both have left a lasting legacy. So why does one get praised while the other gets mocked? It's time to give Godzilla the credit it's due. And with all of that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media. Right now, we're celebrating Halloween on the channel. So we've got a podcast where me and my buddy Billy from Woodstock Roadshow talk in detail about a lot of great movies to watch around this time of year. We go over Shin Godzilla. It's so good. And there's just this horror where, like, I remember in the theaters watching it, I was like, I want to say 13.
Oh, you got to see it in the theaters. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, it came out here in America, and my mom took me. I was like 13 at the time. And she loved it. And that was kind of a surprise for me. You know, we talk about some zombie movies.
You mean the movie line?
And that line just gets me every single time.
Yeah.
And even some movies that you wouldn't really expect. I love the Ronald McDonald stuff they used to do back in the day.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.